Good evening. I'd like to call the Planning Commission meeting for February 21st, 2023 to order. The first item on the on the agenda is public comments. We welcome our community members to the Planning Commission's meeting. In this forum, the Planning Commission does not engage or dialogue with the public. The primary role of the Planning Commission is to listen. We will hear from our on-site guests first, followed by our virtual guests. If you are online, please use the raise hand feature now if you wish to speak. All guests must address comments to the chair and city planning commissioners. The clerk will acknowledge your request and call your name when it is your turn. Your time will start when we confirm that we can hear you. Due to time constraints and to provide fair time to all community members, we must limit each speaker to 3 minutes. We will not split your time with others or reset your time. Please state your name and city of residence for the record. Screen sharing is not allowed. You can submit materials to the Planning Commission or clerk in advance. Materials submitted after the meeting will be provided to the Commission for the next meeting. Please do not comment about pending development projects on which the Planning Commission or City Council will make future decisions, as those are quasi-judicial matters, and planning commissioners and council members must limit communications about such matters. This meeting is being recorded. We appreciate our citizens taking time to express your comments. I see no one in the audience.
We do have one online comment.
Okay. Welcome.
Good
Dakota
afternoon.
Rash.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Dakota Rash. I'm a resident of Lake Forest Park. Thank you all so much for the time tonight. I'm sorry I couldn't be there to see you all in person. I was looking through the comprehensive plan updates that I know you all are going to be addressing tonight. But actually, before I get to those, I want to thank you all for the work you are doing, especially in taking innovative approaches like setting aside development areas around rivers. You know, the way that Native communities kept these lands habitable for thousands and thousands of years before they were colonized was by living in harmony with the land. And that's the way that's the way we have to proceed in the future, is by taking the land into account as a living relative, something that we need to respect and work with as opposed to bulldoze over. Now, connected is a concern I have with the comprehensive plan update, specifically where PSE is given a lot of praise. Now, how do those two things connect? Well, PSE recently built a huge LNG facility down in Tacoma on tribal lands without meaningfully consulting with the tribe. They, I hear, delivered a box of donuts, and that's about it. And they started operating before they got a permit. PSE are not altruistic environmental actors, as their very well-funded advertising campaign would have you believe. They are a company that desperately wants to make money by any means possible. You can see this by their coal share of power actually increasing from 2020 to 2021 when they learned that they had to phase out coal by 2025. They were like, okay, well, let's make all the money off of this we can right now, even though it is the dirtiest fossil fuel. And now they are promoting to expand fossil fuel use. They want to build more fossil fuel infrastructure. They want to build more facilities for fracked gas, which leaks methane, which is an incredibly potent greenhouse gas. So be careful about who you're getting in bed with. I know there aren't a lot of other options right now, but we need to think innovatively, support things like public utility districts, and get away from corporations that have proven they only want to profit materially. They don't want to look out for our collective futures, even though, that's rather short-sighted in my view, because they're on this planet too, and they survive off of all the ecosystem services that are being damaged by short-sighted actions like expanding fossil fuel use. So thank you for the work you're doing, and I encourage you to take innovative, bold steps to shake off the shackles of corporate greed. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Is there anybody else?
There's no other comments.
All right. Our next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, I will, the minutes will stand approved as written without objection. The first agenda item is the comprehensive plan update public services element, which we started last month. And this is the end of our vacations, isn't it? So you're going to go over the staff memo first, I assume. And then we're going to go and do our thing. Okay.
Well, just before we get down to business, I'd like to introduce Shannon Tipple-Lean, who is the new administrative specialist in the Community Development Department, who will also be serving as the clerk, Planning Commission. So if you see a new face, that's who it is. So please say hi. And that's who you might be seeing emails from. So we will also still be having a co-clerk at the meetings to run the online portion, and that person will vary, but Shannon will be here at all the Planning Commission meetings. So now I'm going to turn this over to Laurie so she can go over the first staff memo related to the public services element, which is a continued discussion for tonight.
Good evening, Chair Thompson and members of the Planning Commission. So Debbie has given you the introduction that we're continuing our conversation about the public services element. I highlighted the changes that you had requested at your last meeting in blue, so you could distinguish those from the ones we previously discussed. And I wanted to go over just four or five points that you had raised, and then I discussed in your staff memo. So the first one was your concern that addresses and contact information be added to the background information on human services. I talked with the Assistant City Manager's office, and as you know, they're hiring a new Health and Human Services person to work on this type of issue. They fully envision preparing a separate document that would be basically a handout for the community that would list phone numbers, addresses, etc. So it seemed more appropriate in this potentially 10-year comprehensive plan document to leave that information out of the overall discussion and leave it up to add an implementation measure that this document will be prepared, providing that information. The second thing related to human services is that additional resources for mental health concerns were requested, particularly for youth. So I went back and they provided the names of some organizations, and I put those in related to that topic. So are there any questions about those changes?
I see none.
Okay. The third point, you had asked about level of service standards for police and fire services. They do not, unlike traffic level of service, they don't have a standard measure that they use. They look at response times. They look at the types of calls that they're receiving. And they regularly evaluate their staffing levels to make sure that they can maintain appropriate services. They know that as the city grows, the need for services likely will increase. And so I've added new language to those two discussions after talking with Chief Moen and the Fire Chief Cowan, about how they review their service. So any questions about that?
Apparently not.
Okay. Then the last question that you had asked was about the student attendance numbers for Bastyr and Kenmore. We had included the total number across the two campuses, the Kenmore campus and the San Diego campus. And after I sent out the packet, I received the information from local Kenmore Bastyr. 487 students attend the Bastyr campus. And so I would add that number into the revised public services element. I also need to adjust the city staffing levels. We had talked previously about the climate action manager and the health and human services manager, but to go along with that, the city council last week authorized an administrative position in finance. So I need to increase the number by one person and then readjust the employees per thousand. It'll be a little bit over 2 employees per 1,000 residents. So I would make that change as well. The other amendments in blue were ones that you had specifically requested. So if you had questions about any of those, I'm happy to answer them.
I have a quick question about Bastyr University. You know, we here in Kenmore are very privileged to have a med school essentially, right? I suppose, I think one of the things that we may want to consider adding is resources that Bastyr University may offer the community, whether the community clinics. I was going through the plan and I don't think there's anything in there informing the community about whether or not Bastyr University does have any resources that they can potentially offer the community. So I think that's something that we may want to consider including, since I think Bastyr is one of 3 naturopathic med schools in Washington State. And I think it's important for us to be appreciative of that. We're privileged to have that. And I think we should certainly highlight some of the resources that Bastyr does provide to the community. So I think that might be something that we may want to consider looking into.
Any other comments? Excuse me?
Are we open to questions and comments on the entirety of this part of the packet?
No,
Or
just exactly what she's,
Okay,
because
no.
then we'll go through it.
No, thank you.
Yeah, so I heard Commissioner Caudry's request, and do I see head nods? In which case I'll go back and will, I think I can get the clinic information or other resources at the university and maybe add a sentence or two about that.
Thank you.
Okay, right.
And we're ready.
Okay, I didn't have anything else to present on the public services element unless the commission had questions about the changes that were made in this latest draft.
Well, we're going to go through like we usually do to make
You want to
sure-
go through page by page?
Well, not section by section, not going to do page by
Okay.
page. So commissioners, the first part is the introduction, which goes through page 9.5 at the top. Just the generic introduction. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we're going to move to the human services. We're going to go quickly here, so. Okay, next is family services. There are the blue items that Lori had spoken of are there. Okay, the next is,
I'm sorry. Are the contact information be listed in regards to these mental health providers? I know we've listed them, but as far as how to get hold of them might be something that.
This was the discussion I mentioned early on about how the Assistant City Manager's Office is going to be preparing a guide for the community.
Understood. My apologies.
No problem.
All right, so we're going to move on to both senior services and youth services. See, no discussion. Next is library services and fire and emergency services. Okay, cruising along, police services. There's several tables, and I think you've edited up the tables.
Oh,
Correct.
yeah, we replaced one of the tables about police response times, and then Commissioner Lutz has asked that we strike information, I think it was on, it was a different way that crimes were measured.
Right.
And so he asked that we strike that in the crime rate statistics, which is a blue change shown in blue. It's table PS-A.
Commissioner Wyckoff?
Yeah, in reading through here, I don't know the exact paragraph, but I noted that the police information outlined that the most calls were coming in the northeast quadrant of Kenmore.
Mhm.
And that's where I live. So I just wanted to apologize for that. That's my bad.
We'd like to put a footnote for that.
One comment.
Commissioner Watley.
Is it possible or records being kept of misdemeanor crimes versus felony offenses? I'm not sure if that's something that the police is keeping track of as far as
Right.
who's being arrested for a misdemeanor offense, who's being arrested for a felony offense. I think that would be something that would be important for the community to know.
So that is in table PSA, where it identifies crimes against persons, crimes against property, crimes against society, and the statistics per 1,000 population. Is that, were you expecting something more than that?
Yeah, so as a defense attorney, crimes against a person can certainly be a misdemeanor offense as opposed to felony offense as well. So felony offenses obviously are much more serious offenses as opposed to a misdemeanor offense. And so a crime against a person, a crime against a property, crime against society could either be a misdemeanor offense or a felony offense. And so in my opinion, I think it's important for us to either keep track of that, or someone I'm sure is keeping track of it, unless the prosecutor's office is the one that may have information about that. But I do think that we should consider possibly introducing that information to the community because that is important.
Yeah, on the previous page, there's a little bit more description, but not to the level that you're interested
Yeah,
in.
right.
It says crimes against person offenses most frequently include assault and domestic violence, protection order violations. But I can go, certainly if the commission wishes, I can go back to the chief and ask if there's
think-
more information of,
Actually, you brought up MD DV4 is a misdemeanor.
That's correct. And then assault 1, assault 2, assault 3 DVs are all felony matters. And so class A, class B, class C felonies. And so
Mhm.
is this felony versus a misdemeanor offenses? I think it would be important to note.
yeah, I'm happy to ask Chief
Thank you.
Moen whether he could break that down a little more clearly. Perhaps in this paragraph where he discusses the different types of crimes and offer a percentage or something like that of felony versus misdemeanors.
Thank you.
The commission is, okay.
And I know that the police chief periodically does a report to the council on the different statistics and probably has a lot more information. The question then is what level of information is appropriate in a policy document? So we can certainly get it. But again, I just want to make that note that the police chief does give periodic reports to the council.
Is there any further discussion on this item? Is there consensus on the commission to go ahead and like that notation? Okay, we're good. Any other elements on this part? So now we're going to turn the page and we're going to go to Community Court and the Regional Crisis Response Agency. Seeing no discussion. The next one's Emergency Management. All right, Public Schools. Oh, Commissioner Banaziski.
Thank you. I noticed, looking at the table again, that there are two programs that aren't on here, and they're relatively new. One is Innovation Lab High School. It's in Bothell, but it is a choice school. So it's possible that some Kenmore High School age students might go to Innovation Lab High School. And then the North Shore Family Partnership is a relatively newish program for families who are seeking an alternative learning environment. And I know for certain there are some families in Kenmore who use that program. I believe that their on-campus site is also in Bothell, but it's a program that serves families who are culturally homeschoolers, so they may do a lot of their learning outside of that.
Oh, I got Innovation Lab High School. Could you give me the name again?
Yeah, the second one was the North Shore Family Partnership. Then there's also another program that's tangentially related to the North Shore Family Partnership, and I can't offhand remember the name, but it is, I think it's not really targeted to homeschoolers. It's targeted to kiddos who don't do well in a traditional school setting and would thrive with most of their learning online. So it's more of a traditional school, but it's online. And I wish that I could remember the program, but I can't.
Does the commission wish these to be added? No objections? Well, that brings up another topic. Thank you, Tracy. Shouldn't we have a number of how many homeschooled students we have? Because North Shore has to track that, don't they?
I can certainly ask them if they have those numbers and add that information
Yeah,
if they have it available.
because that would be, I think, rather interesting.
They would know for families who have children 8 and above, is the age of compulsory education in Washington is 8. So you can, as a homeschooling family, not send your kid to kindergarten, but not report to the school district. But any kids 8 and over, you do have to file a letter, an intent to homeschool if your child is 8 or over. So they would know about those kiddos, but not necessarily the younger ones.
Is there any further discussion on the public schools item? Seeing none, we'll move on. That includes the future growth for schools on page 921. And then finally, we have Bastyr University section, which I believe has been addressed. Is there any further topics on that item? Okay, so now we're going to go to goals, objectives, and policies. And our first, we're going to do the first goal, of course, and then we have objective 1.1. 1.2. 1.3. That finishes goal 1. Next is objective goal 2 and objective 2.1. 2.2. 2.3. And that finishes goal PS2. So now we're going to go to goal PS3, which is objective 3.1. And then 3.2, 3.3. So that finishes goal 3. So now we're going to go to goal 4, 4.1, 4.2, 4.3. And that's the end of goal 4. So now we're going to PS5, goal 5, and 5.1, 5.2, 5.3. Boy, that was fast. And hello. Good evening. And finally, we're on page 927. And that topic is implementation strategies. Now, Commissioner Lutis, since you were off gallivanting at some, gaining some honor that you have well-deserved and earned, I will give you an opportunity that if you had something that you wanted to say on this item, which is the public services element, I'll give you a moment. Yeah, the whole thing. Go ahead.
Well, I think, Lori, I think the name of that third program, I think it's something like North Shore Networks. So that could give you a crumb to follow. Thank you.
Commissioner Lutis is good. So I will entertain a motion to conclude discussion and move the public services element to public hearing.
So
And seconded. It has been moved and seconded to move this public services element to public hearing, which will be on.
Undetermined at this point. We'll combine
Undetermined.
it with the utilities element and potentially the economic development element. Those three elements that community development is managing
Okay.
this year.
To an undetermined date when the other elements that will be heard with this element are ready for public hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And without objections, unanimous approval. So now we're back to Lori again.
All right. So the second item on your agenda tonight is the introduction of the utilities element. And so this is just looking at the background information at this point. The goals, objectives, and policies would be coming forward at a future meeting. And that's because on March 7th, your first March meeting, the transportation element public hearing will happen. And in response to an inquiry from Commissioner Vanderland, the consultant parametrics and the city engineer will be giving an introductory PowerPoint for the community before you all open the public hearing. Then after you close the public hearing, if you have questions or concerns that need more attention, those may be moved forward to another meeting. If you feel like you're ready to adopt, make your preliminary recommendation on the transportation element, you could do that as well. It just depends on how comfortable you are after the public hearing.
Well, it's normally the tradition and the polite thing to do for the citizens that we should actually adopt at the following meeting so that people don't think this is a slam dunk.
That is perfectly fine. It depends on whether you have attendees or not. So there have been times when there were no attendees and
Why
then
not? But they could send
the
letters
commission
in.
moved ahead. But certainly you can move it to a future meeting.
So you're going to go
Okay.
through.
Then the second meeting in March, you'll have an introduction to the CAP, the Climate Action Plan. And that is to get you ready to tackle the climate change element, which is coming your way, will be managed by Richard Sawyer and his team. And I expect that they will be coming to you with a draft element maybe in April. Part of the reason that we haven't tackled the goals, objectives, and policies of the utilities element is because, as you heard in the citizen public comment tonight, there's a concern about how, for example, natural gas use is what the policy for the city is going to be. The cap and the cap is adopted, but there are some changes to the building code that could tackle that issue. And that discussion is coming forward to the city council. I believe it's on March 20th. So we're going to get some preliminary indications of council's perspective on these issues, which I think will help as the commission crafts goals, objectives, and policies related to natural gas specifically. With that, the background information that we provided came from, as you can see, a variety of sources. So Puget Sound Energy is the electricity and natural gas service provider for the community. The North Shore Utility District provides water and sewer services, so they provided that information. King County Wastewater Division talked about regional wastewater service. And then King County Solid Waste talked about garbage disposal. I now have the updated numbers for garbage collection and recycling services. So as of January 2023, Republic Services served 176 commercial customers, 89 multifamily customers, and 6,259 residential customers. I'm just offering those numbers. Obviously, I'll update the background information. And 78% of Kenmore's residential customers, including single-family and multifamily, divert garbage to composting or recycling. So those are the pieces that were missing when I provided the background information to you. So time for questions, comments, concerns as you look at this background information.
Commissioner Vandeline.
As we continue the discussion, one of the things I would have an interest in hearing more about is how within the comprehensive plan, we look at utility into the future and the planning for utilities in the future. How is that impacted by the city's plans to increase density?
Right, actually, all of these agencies and entities are aware of the city's plans. North Shore Utility District, for example, used our capacity numbers as they were updating, I think it was the water plan, and I think they're currently updating the sewer plan. PSC has forecasts of growth in the area, and maybe not so specifically for Kenmore, but the agencies do recognize what our plans are. In fact, I'm meeting with the PSE representative on Thursday to talk generally about Kenmore's comprehensive plan update. So I feel like they're aware of our plans. North Shore Utility District certainly is. And it's kind of like the police and fire services. They don't have level of service standards the same way we have in the transportation element, but they do have an awareness of the growth we're expecting.
Awareness sounds great. Would be nice if we had some kind of a comparison that says, here's our expected or anticipated density growth, and what are the individual utility providers' plans? How does those compare, particularly in timing to provision of that additional capacity?
Is there a head nod on that? Yep, there we go. It's not just one more garbage can. Commissioner Wyken.
I'm not sure, sorry, hot mic. I'm not sure if this is the appropriate place, but it just dawned on me. In my neighborhood, again, the bad one up in the Northeast, we're envious of our neighbors in Bothell who have recycle pickup every week, and we only get it every other week. I'm not sure how we go about raising that with the services, but I would like to start that bandwagon.
Do we know why that is? Why it's every other week here in Kenmore? Is there a reason?
Yeah,
behind that?
I don't know. I can pursue that with Jennifer Gordon, who manages that contract. I'm not sure whether like a policy in the comprehensive plan would be appropriate. I don't know, because I don't have enough background on the issue, but I can certainly talk with her. She can talk with Republic Services and determine why it's every other week versus every week.
I'm not going to say that some of Kenmore's recycling ends up on the Bothell side every other week, but
No wonder the police are pursuing.
Northeast.
All right. So next, any other comments or questions? Oh, Commissioner Vandeline.
I'll put one out here that's been on my mind, particularly as we think about creating policies and objectives related to the replacement of fossil fuels, specifically natural gas. Is again, it's the same sort of question. What are our utilities providers' plans, timing for that? And specifically, how do they anticipate going about that? Obviously, we can't back out of our current natural gas, in particular services, without having some replacement. What is the utilities plans specific to Kenmore for that? And what's the timing?
Okay, are there any other requests of our staff or questions of our staff? Lori's feeling like she needs more questions, I can tell.
And we won't let her go until they're all.
Commissioner Beneziski. No, we're not going to pay. This is not moving anywhere. It's just, in fact, we're not going to see this again for a while.
Right, probably April, I would
Yeah.
guess.
Okay, then in that case, I'd better make my comments now. I share the concerns about PSE and their involvement with fossil fuels. I share the concern that the commenter made tonight in public comment. And I think that a more kind of robust capturing of the whole story of PSE and the existing conditions and forecasts of future needs would help us understand more clearly what they're doing now and give us a sense of where we need to go. We in the existing distribution system, we talk about how much renewable energy they produce from wind and hydropower, but without context, it doesn't mean very much to me. Like, how much energy is that? I did a little bit of looking online and it says it's just over 15% of the energy that they provide to us comes from renewables. So that tells me something, that we have a long way to go to get where we need to be. So things like that, I think, would be really helpful to flesh out how they're providing energy to us. They also supply electric service generated by natural gas and coal, but that wasn't really highlighted here. On the PSC website, for example, it says electricity generated by coal is 23% of the electricity they provide, hydroelectric 24%, and natural gas 27%. So that's a huge percentage of their electricity that's being generated by fossil fuels. Oh, and with the hydroelectric, that's not fossil fuels, but I have a concern as a salmon recovery advocate about how much of the electricity being generated in that way is salmon safe. There are a lot of dams that have been really destructive to salmon runs, so that's a concern I have. And then I want to celebrate them for the good work that they are doing, but I also don't want to let them off the hook for the long way they have to go. So yeah, I think it's just important to be really clear-eyed about that.
Commissioner Vandalin.
Just a general comment, observation. In the past, when we've gone through the utilities element in previous updates, it's been one of those sections you kind of go through pretty quickly, and it tends to be very factual. I think you're probably getting a sense that that's not going to be the case this time. So I think thinking about how we get a conversation going, particularly with people like PSE and others, actually having them come in and not necessarily providing testimony, but answering our questions directly, so we could actually have a dialogue with them and others. So we could, I want to be sure that when we end up with whatever update we're going to do to the comprehensive plan, that we have reasonable objectives and we understand what the timeline and the work effort is going to be involved, and understand who's we'd be looking to provide to deliver on those objectives.
I think that's a great idea. And the PSC representative had offered to come to a meeting. I didn't think that this was quite the appropriate one, but I think having that attendance, plus having, excuse me, feedback from the meeting with the council about the building code and the cap, having that feedback will help inform the discussion, which I know is going to be robust this time around.
Commissioner Wyckoff.
Yeah, I'm gonna also have similar questions along the Ziply fiber and the contract that exists with the city regarding the south side of the river, along those same lines.
Yeah, I can check on the franchise. It may be that, I don't know how long that franchise is, but that's already a contract, and I'll check on what the timing of that is and issues surrounding that. Happy to do that.
I'm looking at,
Go ahead, just,
I'm looking at the references, and not to be just nitpicky here. You know, in a lot of these says personal communication from so and so and so and so. So personal communication is what, for phone?
Email.
Email, okay,
Mhm.
gotcha. And is it possible for us to put specific dates on there, just, or is it just general January of 2023? That's what I see over here, is just the general dates, but are these communications being made on like specific days, or just one phone call, one email communication, or is it just like?
It depends. If I
Okay.
have follow-up questions, it may be a series of emails. PSC, I had some follow-up questions, which they then responded to. So it would have been a series of emails.
Sure.
Those are all public records.
Right.
Does the commission want me to add the exact dates?
I don't think it's necessary. I just wanted to clarify just these
Mhm.
references here, so I think we're okay. I do think that a lot of people will have questions about PSE, and, you know, Seattle Times has covered PSE's investments per se, and what they're doing with the legislature. So I do think that that's important to know when you do have contact with PSE, that, you know, we keep those in track at least. And so I think that's very important for us to keep track of.
Commissioner Benaziski.
Yeah, I would be willing to listen to PSE, and I think at the same time, the kinds of information that I am hoping can flesh this out it is just numbers, like what percentage of the electricity comes from coal, what percentage comes from hydro, things like that. I think will really flesh this out. They are qualitative numbers, and I don't care if they come from PSE or if we get them from their website. I am concerned about getting information only from PSE, because they are a very powerful lobby and they have their own particular spin. And I would want to be sure that we're getting multiple perspectives, I guess, if there's anything that's going to be political, I guess, for lack of a better word. But the information that I was hoping we would flesh out for this introduction is really just numbers and things like that, to tell a more full picture about the energy that we're getting in Kenmore.
Sure. I'm not sure who we would get besides PSE to offer input on their organization.
Yeah, I think you're right. And at the same time, we're going to get a very particular point of view and story from them about themselves.
Yeah.
I want to acknowledge that.
Commissioner Lucis.
In listening to the last council meeting, one thing I heard that was of concern was, I know that funding for the cap was a big topic. But from what I heard, the PSC representative mentioned that there were systems in place to assist those who needed help paying utility bills and whatnot. Would it be possible to maybe allude to some of those programs in the general section of electricity, or in the general sections of the utilities element? And my thinking there is just to sort of circumvent future conflict, or if somebody looks back at this in the future, having that be addressed as it unfolds right now in front of the council. It doesn't need to be anything large, but I know that we include a lot of information on how many residents they serve, but also just maybe something along the lines of in the general section, PSC also provides different alternatives or methods to offset the cost of utilities for those, you know, facing financial hardship or something.
Yeah,
brief.
there is a section under their energy conservation programs
Mhm.
that talks about the different things that they do, including energy advisors,
Mhm.
Energy assessment, as well as informational brochures on rebate and incentive programs. PSC also provides weatherization assistance for low income
Mhm.
customers. Are you thinking to go beyond that and talk about like rate.
So when I read this, I read that portion of the energy conservation programs, and my understanding with how it read was that that assistance was specifically for energy conservation methods for users.
Okay.
And I was referring to the broader sorts of tools that they offer residents just for being able to afford their utility fees. Now, in what that may look like, I'm not sure if we want to keep that brief, or in talking with PSC, the representative, if they have certain bullet points that they highlight, that might be good to include, especially for residents looking over this in the future.
Well, comment that I have. First of all, I'll follow up on your comment, and that is the numbers are important. It's all in the numbers. It's like Shark Tank, you know, it's all in the numbers. So I'd like to see what percentage they are providing subsidized funds to pay for electricity and gas compared to the entire amount of money that they're collecting from us. So that is a good example. And then the other area is about the weather, you know, the weatherization and light. Where you're saying to reduce not weatherization, but solar alternatives to the, and just kind of see how those things are looking compared to like Seattle City Light and maybe a couple other. And I know it's a little apples and oranges, but gives us a flavor.
So you're talking about getting data to kind of flesh out the programs that are offered in terms of number of people or residents served in Kenmore, correct? That was the first
Oh,
part.
yes, that's.
And the second part then was trying to get data on other providers.
Well, you know, I'm open to hearing what is reasonable to obtain, but I would think that with regard to subsidy, that comes straight through PSC. I mean, I'm talking about how much money they provide, not other community organizations, but they have a program and how much subsidy do they provide for low income or people that are in need directly from their coffers. Now, with regard to the solar panels and all of those kinds of things, I kind of get it. And also the money can come from a variety of sources. So if that's not going to work, just as far as, well, just let us know and we'll take it from there. That's reasonable.
Just to add to that, how are they determining low income? I mean, what's the baseline for that, if there is a baseline for them? So I do think that that's important to know as well, as to how they're determining low income housing.
Well, Saad, if I may suggest that you do have to get this thing kind of, because they're not only, it's taping for the record. Sure. And for the clerk to, if she has to go back and hear what you said so she can make notes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
These things can be obstructive. Okay, so I have a second item now that I finished your item. And that is, I would like to see a statistics on outages in our city that they have experienced, and I know they keep track of this. And then it would be nice to see some comparative data with other utilities in King County. Well, I like City Light would be one. I mean, I know it's some of it's apples and oranges, but yet it gives us a sense of what they are doing for their infrastructure. For instance, where I live up on the hill, the northwest side, we used to lose our power like 4 times a year and sometimes for at least 2-3 days. But they did a major upgrade over, that's not me, 68th and up the hill. And that really made a difference as far as the amount of outages we've had in the last 3 years compared to the prior 10 or 20 years. So, and so there might be a good thing for them to show too. But service continuity and reliability is an important feature of for both our commercial properties. I mean, we wouldn't want his beard not to be processed right. I mean, that would be awful. But anyway, so it's both for commercials reasons as well as residential reasons.
I'm glad you brought that up, Dwight, because I'm sure Lori and Debbie will remember the last time we went through this, we had a big to-do about this issue, particularly the fact that we didn't have sufficient number of underground services and that we were particularly vulnerable in this area to windstorms and others and outages. And I think just before this
Excuse
conversation,
me, Commissioner, can you use your mic, please?
Sorry, we had a good example of that with a big windstorm that knocked out a good part of the city. So we had a long conversation about that. And we asked the utility to give us what their planning was for moving to underground in our area specifically. So we could have a sense of that they were actually addressing that in the timeline that they had in mind for doing that. I think they did that. I think we have seen some improvement, but I think it may be time to remind them once again that this is something that's of interest to us, and we'd like to have some update on that because particularly as we grow more and we have more density, where it's going to be more demand. And I think for a lot of our potential development, there's an opportunity there to have some of those utilities installed underground versus above ground.
I know that PSC has given, again, periodic updates to council on the improvements they've made. And so that would probably be a good source to look at when the last one was, to see what data they've provided and if they have any way to update that. I'm still struggling a little bit with gathering data from other utility providers, if what that will kind of tell us or not in this context. So if we're contracting, looking at providers who provide power in Seattle or somebody other than PSE, again, it's kind of that, how do we do the apples to apples comparison, and what will that really tell you or inform you, other than it's nice data to have? I'm just trying to think about the relevance of that to the update.
I have a sneaking suspicion that the power companies keep track of all this and all the data. But I may be wrong.
I'm sure that they do. I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, I like data too, I like information, but sometimes I'm trying to figure out that I'm trying to sort of be mindful of resources and what will really this information do and help you in terms of either background information or future goals and policies. That's sort of my question, is to try and tie that directly. I'm all for getting data. I'm just kind of mindful about the resources and time it takes to gather all this data.
Commissioner Lutus.
I'm sorry to add another data point onto your list, but I would find it interesting to also look at their response times to incidents as well. I mean, we look at that for emergency response services and things like that and the other elements. So I think it would be helpful at least to look at PSC's response times for outages in the community, or how they prioritize responses and things like that. And maybe that could be useful in the future when it comes to policies and goals and regarding improving access and services for the city.
Commissioner Banazinski. Oh,
I was going to respond to Commissioner Lutz's comment, which is that I think asking them to give response times is actually not very helpful, because I think it totally depends on the event. If half of the city of Kenmore has lost power, the response time for that incident compared with 5 people who lost power on the south side of the city is going to be very different. And it doesn't make sense to provide an average response time. I think the notion of what the priorities are, that is a different question, and that actually might prove useful just for general information. What are the priorities?
And that's why I threw that in there, because I wasn't sure how feasible response time would be, or if maybe looking at priorities, yes, I think that's interesting too, but maybe PSC does have sort of maybe that data when it comes to priorities, if there's a larger priority or area, if they focus on that fast or something like that. But whatever data you can get, I'm happy with that. I completely understand. And I was cognizant of that concern too.
they might keep track of fried squirrels off of transformers. That's what does our street almost every time in the last couple of years. Well, it's a lot better than the whole neighborhood going out, you know, so. Okay, Commissioner Berezinski, it's your turn.
So first, I have a question of clarification for Debbie. So you are wondering about the utility of collecting information from like Seattle City Light, for example, that you're wondering what the comparison would show us between PSC and Seattle City Light, not the utility of gathering that information from PSC. Is that right? I just want to clarify what you were saying.
Excuse me. Well, I think PSC, as that is the city's provider, that's the city's provider, and we can ask for that data and we can see what level they can break it down to for Kenmore. So I guess that's a question to ask, is what data is readily available and can it be broken down for Kenmore? Again, then it's like, what would you, I'm just trying to, in my head, kind of figure out contacting these other agencies going, tell me the same level of information for what? For each city, for each, and what are you going to do with that? What is that going to help you with, other than it's nice data to have? So I'm pushing you a little on that, because what are you going to do with this in the comp plan? How is that going to help you with formulating goals and policies? It's great data. I'm just pushing you a little bit on the usefulness of it.
And I might add a little bit just to give an example. So say we collect data from Seattle City Light on their outages, and then we collect data from PSC on their outages. How is that even comparable, given it's a completely different grid, it's a different organization. The weather, believe it or not, is different between Kenmore and Seattle oftentimes. And again, we could provide that information, but what do you do with it? How is that helpful? Because it is that collecting that information is that's an effort. And so the question is, what is the utility? What are you looking for? What do you think you're going to get from asking for the same information from Seattle City Light, for example?
Commissioner Berezinski, you've got the floor right now. Are you done? Or we're going to follow up? Go ahead.
And now I'm trying to understand maybe the thought process of my fellow commissioners. Was the desire to see to have some objective measure of what level of service we are getting from PSC? Was that the underlying goal, is to be able to compare to somebody else to see how we compare?
Yes, was my that's one of the reasons for my request. And the other thing is, what's the outcome of policy is, should there be an objective in our policy to reduce or minimize outages? Is that a problem or a priority that we should, spell out? We're not going to get a hard little number, but as far as
Well, I don't know if that's appropriate to put in the policies or not, but I guess the question was, if it is, we can. Again, what is the utility, no pun intended, of having that comparison to other utility providers? I think, you know, we can push PSE. We have a franchise agreement with PSE. We can ask them for data. I'm just struggling with what you would do. And then what would you say? We want PSE to be similar to Seattle City Light. And again, as Laurie pointed out, the two, that's where the apples to oranges or pears, what other fruit we're going to compare it to.
well,
I'm not sure how useful it would be.
well, if we're an apple, then the orange could be Lake Forest Park, because Seattle City Light provides a service, I believe, to Lake Forest Park, and they can identify Lake Forest Park addresses and that within that. So that could be and it's a different provider, I think. Now, I may not have that all correct, but maybe there's ways to slice a little town, or because LFP is somewhat similar to us. They have more trees, but other than that, now I heard noise down there.
You know,
Commissioner Flandre?
yeah, I was gonna, to that point, I think population matters, right? I think Lake Forest Park and Kenmore, they're similar cities per se, and I think if Seattle City Light does provide a Lake Forest Park, the response time is important for us to know. We were paying for our PSE bills, and we want to see, I mean, are we getting the same level of service as Lake Forest Park is getting? I'm not going to compare us to Seattle. It's a big city, but I think response time matters. I think that's the reason why it's important for us to have gauge some information from other utility companies that cater to a city like Kenmore in terms of size.
We're trying to narrow it down for you, Dan.
Well, I appreciate that, because again, I'm trying to kind of give an appropriate framework for the questions I'm going to ask, to then figure out what are you going to do with it. Because I don't want this to be a bring me a rock kind of situation where you say, I have this, and I say, you mean this? And you say, no, that's not the right kind of rock. That's why I'm pushing you on this.
Okay, Commissioner Banaszewski is going to talk about rocks and rolls.
Actually, Debbie, that happens in my job all the time. I won't tell you who asks me for the rocks, but it is another jurisdiction that's very close to us. I think I'm just trying to, again, get at the kind of the desire that was underlying the request for the comparison data, to figure out if we can satisfy that desire in a different way. Can we set our own standards, just absolute standards, not based on a comparison for what we want the service to be in Kenmore?
Well, it's up to the city council when they do, it's a franchise of some sort or whatever. And that's kind of up to the city council. But the other thing that we may find is that life is good. It's you know, comparatively to a lot of different small towns or cities, that we may be doing fine. I don't know. I do know, like gentlemen on the left side, they're very concerned about the number of outages and people complaining about outages. Up in my neighborhood, they used to complain a lot. And we don't mind the fried squirrels, that just happens.
I guess I'm just wondering if, knowing that people in certain quadrants of the city are experiencing outages, if that's enough to direct our attention to where the work needs to be done. I also live in the northwest quadrant of Kenmore, and I do remember when the power used to go out routinely. I remember many more times than 4 times a year. Happened a lot, and you're right, it doesn't happen as much anymore.
I know the
So then-
Inglewood Golf Club has been out several times, cost lots of, there was a lot of cost to them for being out for a week one time, but that's
Yeah.
more with snow and everything else. But I'm just curious what they're, you know, what we can put into a objective that council may embrace with regard to our residents and our needs, their needs.
Yeah, well, it seems reasonable to want to improve the service, and then just knowing where it's happening with greatest frequency, maybe in Kenmore, as a way to direct our policy recommendations.
That makes sense. I think there's already a general policy in there about improving service. And I guess what you're asking for is, can we get data from PSE to kind of see if there are any problems, which might then help phrase a goal about we need
An
more
objective.
underground service. We need to reduce the number of outages or whatever that might be. And then getting to a final level is not going to be in the comp plan. It's going to be part of the franchise agreement with PSE.
Well, that does, okay, is there anyone else? Okay.
I'll just
Commissioner
tag on to
Duncan.
the conversation. I think Debbie is leading us down, I think, to a good answer. I'm a numbers guy, so this is getting very exciting for me. But one of the things you learn very early on in dealing with numbers is numbers by themselves make no sense. You have to have some comparison. You have to have a gold standard. Not everything has a gold standard. Every gold standard isn't necessarily a reasonable objective, depending upon where you are. So I think what we need to be asking here, and it's the answer and the approach may be different depending upon which objective or type of objective or element we're looking at. I could see, for instance, we were talking earlier about the transition from fossil fuel to electricity. Well, we have a gold standard of sorts out there, and we have city, county, and federal rulings out there about what we have to have and when. So asking, okay, that's what this looks like. This is what it looks like for Kenmore. We need to set an objective. It needs to be reasonable. It has to be an objective that can be obtained. So looking at those as a standard and then saying, okay, PSE, how are you going to get us there? You can do that. I think in some other things, going to Seattle City Light or someplace is probably not going to give us a gold standard. It's going to be useful to us. But having some information about what was our experience in Kenmore 5 years ago in terms of power outages? And what does it look like now? And PSE, what are your plans for improving that in the future? I think you can move something forward. You can have a conversation on that basis. We don't need you to tell me that you're going to have 20% of power outages that are going to be responded to and resolved within 3 hours. We're not going to do that. But we could have a conversation with them that says, okay, explain to us, tell us specifically how you're going to handle this in the future and how this is going to get better for us.
Any other comments before I ask the next question? So oh, great, good. Commissioner.
Yeah. So along that same line, yeah, maybe a year over year heat map of Kenmore showing these were the outages that were reported this year, and it gets bigger and brighter the more of them that repeat in that general location. And so we can kind of compare that year over year. Are we getting better? Are we getting worse? And of course, there's going to be years where we had a hellacious storm. And so it's kind of all over the place. But we can explain that. We have all that data as well. But I think maybe that's a way to go where we can identify that, hey, up here by the park, this is a continuous heat map up here. And it doesn't seem to be getting a lot better. And when it's bad, it's always really bad there. I think maybe that would be helpful.
So what I'm hearing then is, let's concentrate on PSE, see what we get from PSE, see if that allays your question. I mean, it gives you the information you need for the goals and policies. And can we hold off on contacting other agencies until you've seen that?
Yeah,
I'm trying to save myself some time here and because it's going to be a one-man show for a while. So
I suspect the PSE probably has data on all of this we're talking about. So
I think PSE can share their
yeah,
data.
and I don't think they shouldn't and probably can't manipulate data. Well, I'm sure they do, but I don't think that they should be upfront as far as what we're requesting here. So I think PSC should have that information, so.
Like PSC has to, like all utilities, has to file regularly for rate changes and to defend those. And that information is publicly available, and it gets a lot of scrutiny by people who pay a lot of attention, have a lot of expertise in looking at these. So that's the source I would be looking for. Can you tell us, out of your most recent rate filing, do you have data related to this? Take a look at that. And I think that's probably pretty authoritative.
Any further discussion on that? I think our Debbie and almost done Lori have heard enough on this topic.
I think what I'm hearing is you want more data. We'll do our best to get it.
Okay, so this may be, please forgive me but using the TOD, but I'm just talking about the TOD area, okay, that we've been discussing all this time. And of course, the intended development of that area with, multi-story condos or apartments or commercial or whatever it may be. Is there already a requirement from the city that all of that utility has to be done underground? Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah, I would assume so. I think all new development has to underground their utilities. Now, whether there are exceptions, I don't know. That would be a question that I would have to pursue. I don't know that 100%, but I know, for example, in new subdivisions, they have to underground the utilities. And I don't know why, if there were new development occurring in that area, that they wouldn't require that.
I have these thoughts of these buildings going up and you still have poles
I
going
don't
down
think
the
so.
street. And, there's
Well-
an opportunity to put a lot of stuff down in the ground.
Right, and it may be that the poles are still coming down the existing street, but it's from the poles to the new buildings on the property that I believe has to be undergrounded.
I don't see any woodpecker on empty poles yet, but go ahead.
During the 522 project, they put all the utilities along that corridor underground. And is my experience with the neighbor next to me commercially, that any new development happening there, utilities need to be put underground, which has become quite a burden to that project. But that is the current stipulations.
That came up in my mind when we were talking about undergrounding and the percentage of undergrounding. And I just want to make sure that these new big developments are done right. So it sounds like we've got that answered without digging. That nice. Any other comments on this transportation, utilities element, excuse me. We can go back to, no, I'm just kidding. Utilities element. Commissioner Manazinski.
I would love to see a short, very, very short paragraph or a statement up front in the utilities element that ties our reliance on fossil fuels with what's going on with the climate. I know we did something similar with the transportation element. I can't remember exactly how we resolved it, but something like that I feel would set the stage also for our policy recommendations. I know we'll have a whole separate cap element, so just a very short acknowledgement I think would be nice.
Any further comments? Hearing none, we'll move on. Unless you folks have something that you'd like to say in conclusion. Didn't think so. All right. Is there anything for the good of the order? And I would only put Nathan through this because I just love to put him through this. But Nathan, I would like you to explain on the record to your fellow commissioners and those here about what recognition you received tonight.
I was over at Woodinville City Hall. The police chief there was recognizing me in front of the Woodinville City Council. I am involved with the King County Sheriff's Office Explorer program. It's a sister program of the Boy Scouts, and it is a youth volunteer program that allows those age 14 to 21 to serve their community, volunteer at community events, learn about first responders and law enforcement, justice, all that sort of thing. And I've been involved with the program for a number of years now, and it's allowed me to give a lot back to the community. And this last year, they ended up recognizing me as the Explorer of the Year for the King County Sheriff's Office, which is out of around, I think, 80, 90 other individuals who volunteer and things like that. So it was pretty exciting for me. And so that's why I was a little late this evening. It was just brief, but it's just from all of this time, all these years giving back, and it was pretty exciting for me. So that is where I was this evening, and I apologize for my late arrival, but thank you.
Anything else? Go ahead.
Do we have a due date for when we will no longer have Lori's presence?
Oh, yes, we have to, and then we have to have a due date for a party at my house to say goodbye. So is this the end? Did I hear once was the end of March or end of April or end of never?
March 31st.
That's what I thought.
And I will anticipate being at the commission meetings for the 7th and the 20th on March 7 and March 21, although I won't be presenting. So.
Oh, but we'll have something special for you. We will figure this out. So I guess I need to ask the question, how's it going with finding a replacement, Deb?
It's challenging.
So, and we're to take that in its full context, challenging.
We haven't found any yet. I think part of it is there are a lot of planning jobs out there right now. It's just hard to find recruitment. It's hard to find somebody with the right kind of experience. So you need the right kind of experience, and you need somebody that can jump in and do it. This is not a training position, so it's challenging. We haven't found a good candidate yet.
Thank you very much. Comments? Anything, other questions?
No one can ever really replace Lori, though.
Oh, no, not at all.
High bar.
Commissioner Banczewski?
I agree with Nathan, second +1 for that. Is there any news on a 7th commissioner for us, colleague?
There is not. At the end of this year, there are several terms which are up, and so it might make sense to kind of hang on a couple of months and bring somebody on later, perhaps later in the year, to sort of do the recruitment for the terms that are up. And please don't ask me which ones, because I don't remember off the top of my head, but I think there are 3. And so we could do kind of a recruitment at the center. Could do recruitment. You know who you are. So we could do a recruitment then, maybe in September. So I think that might be the way to go, because if we do a recruitment now and then it's too early to do, it seems too early to recruit.
It's a lot of work to do it.
Do it twice. So that I think is where we'll land. So until that time, there'll be 6 of you. So it is really important that if you can't make a meeting, to let us know so that we will know if we have quorum or not.
Okay. If there's nothing else, then the time is 8:23 and the Planning Commission's meeting for February 21st is adjourned. Okay, now that.